Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Breathe Motivation. My name is Anthony Hester. I'm the host for this show. My goal is to help you find purpose and passion in your day-to-day life, and that's why I'm here. So thank you guys so much for joining. Really appreciate it. So let's get started with today. Today is Monday. It's always a great day on a Monday, right? We got to cure the Monday blues. So Monday is an opportunity for you to start your week off fresh. Start your week in a great mind state, right? Mind state. I don't know if that's a word, but it sounds good. So you got to have a great state of mind was what I was looking for. But that's what we got to do. We got to have a great mindset in order to accomplish things. So let's get started. So today's definition is lens. So that's something that facilitates and influences perception, comprehension, or evaluation. So I had a really great conversation this weekend with actually one of my customers, and it was really good to have that conversation. And it's one of those things that in life, when we have conversations with people, it's so good to really, bounce ideas off of each other, or really see that in life, there are a lot of things that are very similar between each one of us, right? And that's what we talked about, was there were so many of us that looked at, we're so different, but honestly, we're all very similar in many ways. I think we're more similar than we are different. So I wanted to touch on this. I always kind of, growing up was, I was and still to this day, I'm very optimistic. And a lot of people are like, man, you're almost too optimistic. You look at things so positively. It's kind of weird. And it was interesting to see, I think a lot of people think I am always just looking at positives. I don't ever look at negatives. And I think that's a very different kind of way of looking at it. But I do look at negatives. It's just a matter of how you present your life, and how you look at life is how you're going to set yourself up for success. So optimism is really just, people always tell me, oh, you look at life with the rose-colored glasses. You always see the positives. You always are looking for positives. And I used to be kind of like defensive about it. But when it comes down to it, optimism is what creates the positivity in my life. And I don't always look at the rose-colored, with the rose-colored glasses on. I'm sure you guys have heard that, right? I've got to be very realistic. But when I'm optimistic, things tend to be more positive. I find better people around me. I find, that my life is on a better turn when I am optimistic. And I have an idea and a faith in what's going to happen in my future or in the present. And that's what optimism is really creating the positive outlook of life and really living within that. And that's what I look at. And I think it's funny when people really kind of judge you based on, hey, you're too optimistic. Well, maybe you should be a little bit more optimistic and really look at life the way it's meant to be, right? You create your life. You create how your life is going to look. And that's why I choose to be optimistic. I want to be optimistic about my future, about my present, because that's what helps me continue to live the best life I can live, right? So that's why I do Breathe Motivation, is to help people that maybe aren't as optimistic in life and say, hey, you can make a difference and make a change in your life. And that's how we win. We've got to be able to change ourselves in order to be the best person we can be, right? So when I look at optimistic does not mean you're only looking at the positives. You simply look at ways to be and create a better way of a winning situation. So there are situations where I go into, there's negative situations that I'm in, but when I'm optimistic that I can power through it. Right? I'm going to find a favorable winning situation out of something that could be very negative. So it gives me this idea where I'm not stuck on my heels. I can pivot and move and do things. Not to say that, these negative things don't, kind of maybe grab a hold of me sometimes, because they do, right? That's the realistic thing. There are negative things that are going to happen. There are negative people. There are negative things in the world that can happen. But being optimistic, I'm resilient, and I'm going to get out of this and make it out a better person. So when I look at, I talk about days that are tough, right? I call them character building days. And the reason why I call them character building days is because I'm going to get better. And that's my outlook out of it. I could have a hell of a day and it could be terrible, but I know at the end of the day, I'm going to learn a lesson from it and I'm going to be better, right? So when I think of optimism, I look at this. I ask myself three things. What is the best thing that could happen? Right? So what is the best thing that could happen out of this scenario or this situation? right? So I kind of assess that and I'm like, okay, here's the best outcome of this. So I focus on that, right? Next, I ask, what obstacles can I run into? There's always going to be obstacles in your way. So when I started Breathe Motivation, some of the things that I looked at were time, right? I work a full-time job, but I also want to, when I started this show, it was an everyday show, Sunday through Saturday. So I was doing 7 days a week and it became really tough. And that's kind of why I backed into, going to a week, once a week or every, maybe a couple times a week, because that time was the obstacle. There was no way for me to maintain what I was doing on a full-time basis with work and maintain 7 days a week without burning myself out. So then I asked, what can I do that will lead to the best things? So I took a little bit of a break, during the holidays to really kind of create this show and, hey, where do I want this show to go and how can I still be effective for the audience that I've grown, right? And that was the great thing about it was I was able to look at that. What is the best thing that could happen? The best thing that could happen is I continue my show and I do it once a week or once every, a couple times a week or however that looks. And, that really creates that free time, it gives me a little bit more time to create better episodes. So when it comes down to it, I have to be optimistic and I have to be realistic about things. At first, when I started this, I started it at 7 days because I was like, I got to hold myself accountable because it's so easy to quit when you don't see things happening, right? So if I didn't see like, oh man, my audience isn't growing, I wasn't going to quit because I was relying on myself to hold myself accountable for that 7 days, right? I committed to 7 days. I went 140 episodes, 140 days in a row, and then I had to reassess. But I always wanted to remain optimistic about the situation, that I can still have a great show and maybe tailor it back so that I can actually not get burnt out and this, becomes a job. I want to be able to help as many people as I can through my experiences. And that's what I did. That's what I committed to. So optimism is a great thing. Some people are very negative and they feel like they are stuck in this negative mindset. And some of that comes, it's kind of created from the people that you surround yourself around, right? Or growing up, right? Maybe you had a very negative parent or maybe you had negative friends around you. And that created kind of that negative talk track that we talk about, like this record that spins these negative thoughts. I used to have negative thoughts all the time. I would tell myself how dumb I was or, how unfocused I was. And, you create that talk track and you almost have to, you have to create a different talk track. So I had to start talking to myself positively. Hey man, you're not dumb. You can learn these things. You can grow from these things. You are, you're a great person, right? I used to feel like I wasn't a great person. And it was a weird situation. Why would anybody say that? But that's what I always heard was, man, you're not that good. Or I would be so hard on myself. And still to this day, I'm very hard on myself. And I'm working on that, right? But I've got to be optimistic about my life. I know that I can create favorable situations that are going to make me better. And it's the same thing in life. I'm going to be resilient. I'm going to be able to change my life because I have focus on it. My focus is to be positive and look at situations in a positive manner, right? When I decided to, in life, I decided that, at the end of the day, I used to blame my life on situations and circumstances. And I never took responsibility for me, right? I had to look at my life and look at my mind and how I was treating myself. And I had to start taking the blame and put it on myself because I listened to so many people that said I wasn't good enough or that I couldn't do things and I wasn't going to, accomplish anything. I had to say, hey, I can't accomplish it. So I no longer let my circumstances run my life. At the end of the day, I run my life and you run your life. You're the only one in control of your life, right? I have my wife and I have my, and I have to kind of balance a life with her, but at the same time, she doesn't control me and I don't control her. We're completely two different people working on the same objectives, right? We're a partnership. And it's the same thing when I look at my coworkers and things like that. We are all individually minded and we've got to come together and work together to be the best that we can be. So you can no longer blame the circumstances that maybe you had a tough childhood, or maybe you have a tough job. You've got to be able to take control and hold yourself accountable and be optimistic that you can find a solution and you can find a favorable solution. You just got to be resilient. When you get knocked down, just know you can get back up and be successful. A lot of us hold on to these things and we hold down, we're hold down to the ground and we're like, man, I don't know if I can get back up. But you can get back up, right? You acknowledge the negative, but you get up, you keep moving and say, I am going to win no matter what. I'm going to run my life and I'm going to live the best life I can. And that's the only way to do it. And it's the same thing when I had anxiety, right? I am not my anxiety, right? I am not that. I can beat this. I can stay focused. I can stay positive. And, at the end of the day, I had to find a root cause for why my optimism went away, right? Why was I caught in this, endless trap of anxiety? Why was I so fearful? And when it comes down to things, when you really look at life, what are you afraid of? What are you afraid of that is holding you back from being the best you can be? Are you afraid of judgment? Are you afraid that you aren't going to be successful based on somebody else's definition like we talked about last week? Right? Nobody can judge you if you hold within yourself that you are doing the best that you can do, right? You got to be optimistic. You got to be positive. You got to stay focused on the great things that are going to come your way, because there are going to be great things that come your way, and you got to know that. And I know you can do it, right? You've just got to be able to put that lens of positivity on, stay focused, and know that you can live the best life you can live, right? Just control the controllables, right? That's a big thing. It's controlling your controllables and knowing that at the end of the day, the things that you can control, you will do, and you will put yourself in a winning situation. And that's what it's all about. So let me leave you with this quote. Almost every successful person begins with two beliefs. The future can be better than the present, and I have the power to make it so. And that's unknown. But go out there, be optimistic, be positive in your life, and know that you can make changes and be the most successful for you and live your definition of success. So follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Breathe Motivate. Like my page on Facebook, Breathe Motivation. Check out my website, breathemotivation.com. You can always reach out to me about topics and any questions that you have at anthonyhester@breathemotivation.com. Greatly appreciate it. Remember to breathe motivation and exhale success, and I'll see you next week. Thanks.